Jonathan Berg, an ordinary literature teacher, always dreamed of adventures. Since he found an old, yellowed novel in a small bookstore in Auckland, his life began to change. The novel was called Sinister Reflection and told the story of a man who became the hero of his own fiction. At first, Jonathan thought it was an interesting coincidence. But when the characters from the book began to appear in his life, he realized it was more than just fiction. One evening, Jonathan was sitting in his cozy house on the outskirts of the city. A storm was raging outside, and lightning repeatedly lit up the room with bright light. He was deeply engrossed in reading the novel when he heard a strange noise from the kitchen. At first, Jonathan thought it was just the wind, but the noise repeated, becoming louder. Jonathan took a flashlight and cautiously approached the kitchen. On the floor lay the book, open to a page where the hero of the novel confronted a killer in his own home. Jonathan froze, feeling the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. In the novel, the killer left red traces leading to the scene of the crime. Jonathan noticed with horror the red stains on his kitchen floor, leading to the back door. He felt his heart begin to race wildly. "This can't be real," he whispered to himself, but inside he knew everything was becoming real. He opened the book again and began to read further. The hero of the novel found a note describing his next step. He decided to follow the red traces. They led to an old, abandoned house in the woods, which Jonathan often saw in his nightmares. He gathered his courage, put on a coat, and took the book that had become his guide. Jonathan walked through the forest, illuminating the path with his flashlight. Every sound, every rustle caused him panic. Finally, he reached the house. The door was ajar, and dim light was pouring out from inside. Jonathan raised his hand to knock, but the door opened by itself. He entered and saw a table with a book on it, similar to the one he was reading. On the first page, it was written, "Your fate is written. You are next." Jonathan realized with horror that he was not the only one who had become part of this terrifying novel. He heard footsteps behind him, but didn't have time to turn around. Darkness engulfed him, and he lost consciousness. He woke up in his living room, sitting on the sofa with the book on his lap. It was all a dream, he thought with relief. But when he opened the book, a new inscription appeared on the first page. "This is only the beginning." In the following days, Jonathan lived in constant fear. Every page he turned led him to new horrors. He tried to burn the book, but it kept reappearing on his desk. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was constantly being watched. One evening, he heard a soft knock on the door. Jonathan cautiously approached and looked through the peephole. There stood a woman in a long coat, her face covered by a hood. She raised her head, and Jonathan saw her eyes, cold and soulless. He opened the door. "I know what you're reading," she said, her voice low and eerie. "You can't escape your fate." Jonathan felt his heart freeze with fear. He knew the woman was a new character in the book, and her appearance signaled a new twist of horror. He tried to close the door, but she was stronger. "You can't escape," she repeated, stepping inside. "The book writes your fate, and you can't change it." Jonathan realized that the only way to stop this nightmare was to finish the book. He ran to the table, grabbed a pen, and began to write. Every word was a struggle, but he knew it was his only chance. He wrote about how the hero found the strength within himself to confront the darkness, how he destroyed the book and freed himself from its curse. When he put the final period, the light in the room became brighter, and the woman disappeared like a ghost. Jonathan breathed heavily but felt relief envelop him. He destroyed the book by burning it in the fireplace, and finally, he felt free. But somewhere in another small bookstore, on a shelf lay a new book, waiting for its next reader.